Okay, this is just a recap. I had forgotten to begin the recording at the beginning of the meeting, which began after 10 o'clock. Thus far on the agenda, we are on 4B on the agenda, discussing topic 4B, which is the discussion and possible action concerning the line between best practices and provider discernment for declining or discontinuing services with a patient and the prohibition against patient abandonment. The only actions, the council has not taken any action up to this point in the meeting except for a vote to excuse Ms. Janine Smith, a council member, due to illness. Other than that, there have been no actions taken by the council. It's just been reports from staff on the informational items only under agenda topic number 3. So that's it, I'm sure.
Thank you. For those of you who might not be aware, I am CEO of a dental clinic that addresses homeless and low-income patients. And I can tell you, John, that we've done something very similar. It's a protocol that we've instituted for special needs patients. In this case, people who are suffering from trauma, addiction, chronic poverty, and we have had more than our fair share of instances where we have to address the kinds of behavior that put clinicians at risk. And in our case, the clinicians are volunteer. So I can see where that could become quite an issue. In 10 short years, we've had a number of, intimidating incidents, and for the betterment of the clinicians, but also to protect the patients from going too far. I think that you'll find that this is not unique to the field of psychology or to behavioral health clinicians.
John, is it, does the abandonment concerns, does that fall under ethical violations?
Yes.
What's happening is that I feel like practitioners know, it's hard to define in a rule, what's when have you crossed the inappropriate line, but it's one of those things when you see it, you know it. And I think that you've got practitioners that know it. They know that they're in this situation, and then they're like, we need to cut bait on this. This is not a good fit. And what they're afraid of is getting a complaint filed against them to say, did you abandon this person? And when the facts say I immediately ceased giving services to so-and-so because at reason X, Y, and Z. Now they've got to come down to Austin and explain why X, Y, and Z were appropriate. And just, I don't know. And it sounds like in some of these cases, there probably have been practitioners who have stayed in these sort of practice relationships with a patient longer than they felt they should have or wanted to, for fear of what the board would do. And what my point is that I think it's important to say to the board, no, yeah. If it's inappropriate, it's time to cut bait.
Hey, Dr. Taylor, how do you instruct your employees on how to handle this situation?
Oh, that's a great question, Steve. If we have a client, and this has happened a few times, that is kind of exhibiting some sort of inappropriate behavior, we notify them. We work with the clinician to determine if termination is necessary or if an internal referral to a different therapist would be better. And then we notify the client, and then we provide referrals. And I think that last part often gets hung up for some therapists. Is we still have to provide those referrals. We can choose to end treatment, for many reasons, but we got to give those referrals, and I think that's a big thing.
See, I would think that any therapist that followed the instructions that their employer has provided for them for how to address this is going to stay out of trouble with our board for sure.
Yeah, but a lot of therapists are in private practice by themselves. They don't have an employer, are their own employer, so they kind of have to just sort of figure it out. And then there's not a lot of resources for it, and I think that's kind of what John's getting at here, is that there's not a guide that says this is the best way to do it to make sure you don't get in trouble. I like that idea.
Well, we are, ever since I've become involved with LPC board, we have been doing more of these guideline recommendations that, and it's in that gray area where it's not technically a rule being broken, but there is some consideration by the LPC on I see them in a gray area, and I don't want to violate a rule. And so we've put together and put it on the website guidelines for best practice. And like John is not advocating for rulemaking, so maybe this kind of falls into that sort of middle ground area. We issue some guidelines that to keep you out of trouble.
Yeah, I think it would be very similar to what psychology did with the social media discussion. Instead of creating a series of rules, rather just put a sort of a how-to guide or a guideline of saying, here's some do's, here's some don'ts. I think that would be beneficial.
Dr.
Yeah,
Taylor,
John-
I think you brought up a great point about the referral out process. And when you mentioned it, that triggered a couple parts of the conversation and complaints that I've seen or confusion I've seen. It's, if I know I need to end this now, like what's my timeline to refer them out? And in some cases, it's like, I know I need to end this now. I'm not prepared at this hot minute to refer them out. I don't know exactly where. And that's, I think, kind of the part of where people stay in this clinical relationship longer than they felt comfortable, because they know that it was a stinky situation. I think that if I was going to get hung up on something in writing this, that would be the point.
And I think that there's some risk about referrals too, just even from a legal standpoint. So you're referring a patient who's been threatening or sexually inappropriate anyway, or aggressive in ways that are that a clinician couldn't handle, and you refer that patient to another clinician. You basically sent a bad situation to an individual. If I were the recipient of something like that, I might have issues with you, clinician to clinician. So there's that risk involved too. I love the idea of best practices. And I understand, at least from a medical perspective, the issue of timing. We have certainly had to do things, not just in an instant, but while that patient is in the chair. So I'd rather err on the side of caution, and I think best practices is good. But honestly, I wish we could develop a good set of rules or regulations.
I think you raise a great point, though, in terms of, I'm thinking about some of the things, and due to confidentiality, I think of ISCs, I'm not going to get too far into the details or specifics, but there have been fact patterns that I've seen. Like the only referral here that should have happened is to law enforcement, not to another practitioner.
Right.
And so that's the thing. And again, I feel like I don't think it's anything that we've done at this board. I think it's years of history probably, and just fear and then the unknown of the regulatory board of what will we do if a complaint's filed in that case.
And it bothers me that any of our boards would be feared instead of considered advocates of the clinicians we represent.
Especially in these circumstances.
From a company or practice perspective, if you have policies in a handbook, or like an employee handbook or a contractor handbook, and you include those best practices, I think that's a great idea. On more of like a macro level, just you should have some of that kind of bedded into what your policies and procedures are, and how you would handle things as from a company or a practice perspective. As an individual, that's obviously going to be, you'd have to do it on yourself. But if you do have a company or a practice, I think making that observable to your employees, I think, is important.
Yeah, because Dr. Taylor, knowing you, I would feel as though if, so you have one of your therapists at Taylor Counseling Group, they have a complaint filed against them for abandonment. And then you sit down with them and you say, look, our company policy on and procedures on this. If you followed these procedures, I will defend you. I will stick up for you here. But like you said, so many of our Texas LPCs are solos. So I wonder if we can translate following policies and procedures to where it's not Dr. Taylor, going to stand up for you, therapist, but we can say, if you follow these policies and procedures, you're not going to get in trouble with the board.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something out there that we could do. Each case is going to be very different, and so there's going to be some complexities in it. But John, to your point, I think depending on the case, you know, a referral to a, you know, psychiatric ward would not be inappropriate, right? I mean, that might be the level of referral that you need, not necessarily to another therapist, but you know, so there's things, as long as you're referring them to the appropriate level of care, I think that's good, right? You might not be the right clinician for them. It's just about helping them get to the right place.
Right.
And if law enforcement has to assist them in getting to the right place, you know. So
best proceed, you guys? How do we best proceed toward our member boards?
If I can perhaps work on a draft. I don't want to give staff more work. Dr. Becker, again, actually gave, I think, a great roadmap in her statements in our meeting that we're not even specific necessarily just to psychologists. That might be a great place to start, and just maybe I can come back to the board next time with either some sort of draft communication.
I'd love to weigh in. Having experienced some of this, I'd love to weigh in. Is there anybody else who'd like to add their expertise to a draft like this?
John, attorneys have extensive rules for how we withdraw from representation. So I'm happy to kind of make some suggestions based on what our requirements are. It's a little different. I mean, we don't have to go in front of a judge and request to know. I mean, we do have to go in front of a judge and request that we no longer represent somebody. So, but we do have certain ethical procedures that we have to follow. And I'm happy to kind of see how those can translate to what you're working on.
Awesome.
I'd like to be involved as well. So if you want to include me in the conversation on it, I would be more than glad to offer any expertise I might have.
Perfect.
Great. Yeah. And that's
Chair Canseco, you put it very well. We would not want any of our mental health professionals to remain in a dangerous situation because they're afraid of getting in trouble with their respective boards.
Thank you. Great. Then John, if you start the process and start passing it down like a bucket brigade, maybe we can have something ready for the next meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you for the volunteers from the rest of the board to work on this issue with me.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item? Okay, let's proceed to 4C, discussion and possible action concerning automation of manual processes currently being utilized by the agency. And I think George Francis is going to lead us on this. George, 4C.
Yep. Let me get there, please.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm only showing 4 E's. You're saying 4 C's in Charlie, correct?
Yes, 4C is in Charlie.
I might have misplaced my documents. Can you tell me where?
Mr. Francis, there weren't any materials in the meeting materials. This is something you had requested on the agenda at the last council meeting.
And Daryl, I apologize. If you can refresh my memory, I don't have my notes in front of me. I do apologize.
I really can't remember the context of what it came up in, to be honest with you. Patrick, do you recall?
Oh.
I think it was just talking about agency operations, and I think there was something about talking about automating certain things, I guess. Changing them from manual to automation, if it was possible.
I do think so. I apologize. I don't have my right notebook with me. If I remember correctly, Daryl, this was in regards to what are some of the things that we could do to automate. And I thought there were recommendations that were going to be brought back to the board, if I remember correctly. But if you like, we can push this to the next meeting. I can get my correct notebook so we don't waste any time.
Okay.
Sure, thanks. Item D, discussion regarding the agency's ability to resume either in whole or in part in-person meetings. Oh boy, we all got used to this. Any discussion, any opinions?
the one thing, let me talk about what our capabilities are. You know, one of the reasons why we kind of stuck to virtual meetings, or a big reason we stuck to virtual meetings other than the pandemic, is if you'll remember, we had that issue pop up with SOA where we were not provided funding to pay for our SOA cases, and SOA was not provided funding to adjudicate our cases. And so we were really kind of, if those costs got too much, we were going to have to rely on the travel budgets to cover the costs at SOA. That has since that concern has since fallen on the wayside. We're not as worried about that anymore. I think going forward in the future, SOA is going to request the additional funding, and we're supporting the request so that they can receive the money directly to adjudicate our cases. But what that brings up is I mean, we're coming out of the pandemic now. We've got the money in the budget to begin resuming travel. The question is do you want to do that now? There are some other limitations here with the building. I mean, y'all can't see it right now, but the meeting room that Gloria and I are in, it's a very small conference room. It's really not designed to house a full board. There's no way I could fit all 9 of you in here. It just won't work. And there's no room for the public. The big conference rooms that are available in this building and in the Barbara Jordan building will not be available until next year. They rush to get all the agencies in here, to get us in here, get us operational, I think because they're in a hurry to sell the hobby building. They want to get it on the market as quickly as they can. So they got us in here, but the meeting rooms are not operational. So having a big fancy meeting room here is not going to materialize until sometime next year. So that means if we want to have in-person meetings, we're either going to have to seek out another location, like what we've done at TDLR in the past, but you don't want to overstay your welcome in a place, and you're subject to the availability of those rooms. Now, once the legislature starts, it will become much more difficult to secure meeting rooms. And in fact, all the site boards have been having meetings at the Capitol, and that will stop come January, maybe even before then. Because those rooms are all going to be taken up from committee. So I just kind of need to take y'all's temperature and see what are y'all wanting to do in the future, and what do you think your boards want to do? Do they want to? And one thing I've seen is a lot of people have gotten used to this, and I've seen pushback from a lot of people. They're like, I don't have to spend as much time out of the day traveling. I don't lose as many billable hours, and I don't lose the money that the state doesn't reimburse me for traveling. So, correct. I mean, there are some benefits to this.
Daryl, can you give us just a quick summary of what we are required to do under Open Meetings Act?
The Open Meetings Act, you can do either totally in person, you can do like we're doing here today, or you could do a combination where 1 or 2 of you more could come to Austin and sit in this room with. You can do a hybrid. This is technically a hybrid. At a minimum, this is what you have to do if you're going to do a virtual meeting, is what we're doing today.
Where the chair is in Austin.
Correct. MFT board did one recently. I think, George, it was y'all's last meeting where Chair Merchant was in Abilene. That was actually where the public had access to come and watch the meeting. Staff ran it all from here. You can do that, but you as the chair then assume the burden of making sure the tech setup is good to go wherever you're at. And that's on you if you choose to do that.
Personally, I think you're probably going to, I mean, if you just consulted everybody on all the boards, you're probably, I would think that the vote would be, if there was a vote, that they would probably want it to be a flexible option, where like, just things come up, and you would also get higher attendance rate if that's the case as well. That's just my personal thought, but I mean, you all can chime in on that, but that's what my kind of personal thoughts are about it, and probably what I would expect the feedback to be overall.
Daryl, what's the feedback from the public so far? How would this impact if we go back to all in-person meetings? How does that impact public attendance? Will we still record them as webinars, public comment, those things?
I think if you go back to all in-person meetings, you're going to have to keep the broadcasting it as a webinar and continue to allow virtual public comment. That has been a huge, people really, really like that. They like the ability to watch y'all, and they like the ability to interact with y'all virtually without having to come all the way down here to Austin. And I'm gonna tell you right now, it is a pain in the backside to get down here in downtown Austin. It just is. And this building is smack dab in the middle between UT and the Capitol. So it's right in the middle of the Capitol complex. So it's going to be tough to get to if you're a member of the public and you have to park and Uber in or something like that. There's not any close public parking right now.
Yeah, and cost can be a barrier with gasoline right now too.
So I think if you go back to either fully in-person meetings, or if you go back to fully in-person meetings, you're still going to have to continue broadcasting. And I would seriously urge y'all to not abandon the webinar and allowing virtual public comment. I think that's just a good thing. That's just good government.
I'll say this is from as a chair of the psychology board, my experience has been, we have tackled this year some of the most prickly and challenging topics that I think, at least in my tenure as a board member and as chair, some of the most prickly things, among the most prickly things that we've dealt with, that there have not been clear answers on. And I will tell you that the productivity and the ability for us to tackle those big issues, getting ourselves together in the same room, face to face, shoulder to shoulder, looking each other in the eye. I have been, I can't brag on my board enough for the massive disagreement walking into some of these meetings in terms of lack of consensus, and the challenging nature of some of these things we're tackling, and the work product that has come out. I'm pretty positive, and based by kind of trial and error, doing some beginning to tackle some of these issues virtually. We kind of failed and kind of didn't get anywhere with it, and we got ourselves together in the same room and everyone rolled up their sleeves and got it done. So I just want to extol kind of the benefits to the board of tackling tough issues. If we're going to be tackling tough issues, I think that it cannot be overstated, the benefit of getting the board together in the seat of our government in Austin, Texas, coming with our thinking caps on to go solve those problems. I agree with what Daryl was saying in terms of public involvement. And we've kind of gotten to be the guinea pig on this, because we just had our last in-person meeting in the Capitol, and we had probably some of the least public input and public awareness of the meeting of that one as I've ever done. And there was no option for the public to participate virtually based on the technology there at the Capitol. So it was a 100% in-person meeting. The only other thing I would say in terms of the hybrid meeting is that if you do the hybrid meeting, there's really nothing to compel board members to Austin if they can participate virtually. So if we did that, especially considering if the budget is there, I really think it is beneficial to get us all in the same room, tackling some of the bigger issues. I think sometimes some of these meetings tend to be pretty light. And if there's a light meeting that didn't have anything of any particular contentiousness, I think that it's a lot, maybe, and if the case is to be made to save on the travel on the taxpayers, okay. But I don't think that we should use cost as the reason to not get ourselves to Austin to do the business of Texas.
Is there a way, like with discretion, depending on a meeting, where the chair can make that decision for the particular board? I know we're just kind of throwing out considerations, but I see your point, though. I mean, obviously we've gotten a lot accomplished in the Capitol building this year, and actually in all the in-person meetings we've had. And I do agree with all those points. I just, in some cases, I think your attendance will be higher with the flex option. But I mean,
you're right.
It was the way it was prior to COVID and everything. So I'm open for consideration on either option, but possibly just allowing in a circumstantial, like basically if it was a meeting where like you said, it's a contentious meeting, that there's a lot of things that need to get resolved, then we could You know, you could say this isn't it. This is a like mandatory in person, that kind of thing. I don't know.
One thing to think about on if you choose to go back to in-person meetings, right now we would have to go find your room elsewhere because we can't do it here. And the problem with that is I don't have any control over the technology available in that room. Most of these rooms are set up the way they're set up. You can't really change anything about the room. So like when we had the meetings over at the Capitol, we can broadcast out, but nothing can come in. And so there was no virtual public comment allowed, but we were able to broadcast out. And I'm afraid we're gonna find that a lot of these meeting rooms are set up that way. The bigger meeting rooms that are available for use, they're set up to broadcast, but not bring anything in. So that's just something to keep in mind when deciding.
Daryl, you think that's the case even after COVID, that they haven't modified some of the rooms to accept inputs?
Well, I know that's how it is at the Capitol. And I know there are a few rooms in the state office buildings that you can broadcast out, but they are not set up to allow anything to come in. I don't know. I don't know every room, George. I'd have to really look around and see and visit with some people to see if anybody has used it. Right now, TDLR is the only one off the top of my head I can think of where in theory we can allow, not in theory, they do it. You can allow people to come in, but it is much more complex than the system we're using here today to let people come in. And that is also part of the problem. That is when you set up something that complex, I'm having to rely on and invoke assistance from other agencies. In other words, they're having to stop doing what they need to do to come help me do mine. And that's where I say you got to be careful not to wear out your welcome on this, because if you do it too much, I don't want to impose on people more than I have to.
Yeah, being respectful of TDLR, they were absolutely. If anyone from TDLR is paying attention or listening, like I'm personally very grateful. They let us use it for a meeting. They let this board use it for multiple meetings, and we would have been pretty homeless otherwise. So I'm very grateful to TDLR, but I don't want to have to rely on them when we have other options.
And this building doesn't have shared meeting spaces that you can.
It will, they're just not ready yet.
Oh.
They won't be ready till next year. Like there's actually a big conference room right across the hall from us here. And that's probably where y'all are going to be having most of your meetings once it's set up, but it won't be set up until next year.
That's not terrible. So what if we continue this way for a year until that room is ready?
I think we only have one more meeting this year, so we're not talking about a lot of meetings for this body. But when you factor in, excuse me, all the boards, yeah, I'm just not sure what they're wanting to do. Of course, they'll kind of decide on their own how they want to handle it. But I just kind of need to know from this body, what are y'all's thoughts? What do y'all want me to do? Because if you want to return to in-person meetings for October, or at least for October, maybe January, February, I need to know, because I need to start looking for some places, because those things book up quick.
Well, Daryl, obviously the thing to do is to wait until we have a permanent space that works. I mean, I don't think it makes any sense to push for in-person meetings right now if we don't have a place to do them.
Agreed.
I think you could probably, for October, you could probably get away with doing it at the Capitol, but that would be a 100% in-person meeting. And so if this is working, because even a week ago, we weren't even sure. And that was part of why I did the last psychology board meeting at the Capitol, is because we weren't even sure at that point, based on when we had to call the meeting, we weren't sure if I would even have access to the technology that Gloria Canseco has right now. So I had to go with what I knew I would have, and that was the Capitol. So
you're also, when you take those other meeting rooms, you are usually taking it subject to whatever entity is housed in that building. So for example, at Hobby Building, the big meeting room down in the lobby area, it belonged to TDI. Now you could use it, but even at the last minute, TDI could have come in the morning of the meeting and said, hey, we need this room, you're out. you're out. And so you're taking stuff subject to, you're contingent upon, you know, the agencies for whom that room is actually dedicated. So that's another little bit of a risk you run when you borrow a meeting room.
Why don't we continue with this format in October? And then let's look at January for the possibility of hoping the meeting room here is ready. And then we book all our meetings like 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Question, Chair Canseco, with the board meetings, if we have it there, if we're going to allow virtual participation for the public, is that technically a hybrid meeting?
I don't know.
Here, you're talking about here?
Yeah, is it? Yeah, if we assume the meeting room across the way is ready to do it within, our own home of BHEC, is that technically, if we're going to have physically be there and we're going to allow public participation, is that technically, what is the?
I would call that a hybrid meeting.
What I call, when I say hybrid meeting, what I'm referring to is we've got, you have to have Gloria here.
Right.
Your chairs would have to be here. And then whatever board members chose to attend in person could, and those that wanted to appear virtually could.
Okay, that answers my question. Yeah, and so my point is that if board members have the option of not attending, I just wanted to, in my experience on the psychology board, to extol the benefits of us making the trip down there in person. We've had people come comment in person, and for people who, whatever their issue is, rises to the level, if they want to be in person to deliver that comment to us, I think it's important for us to physically show our faces to the extent practical.
Understood. Okay.
Okay.
Do we need a motion for that? No.
No. We'll plan on doing a meeting just like this in October, and then we'll kind of remount and reload and see where we stand for it's January or February is y'all's next meeting. I can't recall which. If a meeting room comes available, I can always reach out to you guys and see, kind of take a straw poll and see what or ask Chair Canseco. She can decide what her pleasure is, how she wants to handle it.
Daryl, the January meeting is January 31st.
Okay. So,
Daryl, what will be the capacity of the large room across the hall?
It'll probably hold 15 to 20 members of the public, depending on how we arrange the chairs and how the tables are arranged. It's not set up like a dais, like you're on the dais looking out. They're going to have tables in there. We should be able to rearrange it, but I'm figuring we could fit 15 to 20 people in there from the public. But if we continue to allow virtual comment, I mean, from a very practical sense, nobody should show up. They should just appear virtually. I don't know why anybody would want to come down here and make the trip to do that.
Okay.
I'm talking about members of the public, not the board.
Do we have when the ledge is coming into session next? When the first day is in January?
Oh, it's January. I don't know off the top of my head. It's in that first 7 to 10 days of January is whenever they come into session, I believe.
Yeah, I would just say if anyone has to go down there, hotels get tight if not booked in advance once the legislature's in session, especially being the opening weeks of the next session in January.
Yeah. Technically, once the ledge gavels in, there's a moratorium on bill filing. Nothing can be done. Nothing can be filed for, I think, the first 60 days or something like that, if I'm remembering right. So, but that doesn't stop the flurry of activity from going on down here. It's still very, very active in the downtown area once they gavel.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. That was a good discussion. The next is 4E. Go ahead, Daryl.
This is one. Currently, we publish disciplinary orders on our website. So if you look up a licensee and they have a disciplinary history, you'll see a little link down in the lower left-hand bottom of your search results, and it'll say supplemental or supplementary documents. You click on that and the disciplinary orders would pop up. What doesn't pop up is eligibility orders, because we don't consider those to be true disciplinary orders. Because to discipline somebody, they have to have a license. And remember, an eligibility proceeding is we're talking about an applicant, somebody without a license. And but if an applicant does something that, had they been licensed, would have been a rule violation, we will oftentimes enter into an eligibility order with them, and we'll tell them, look, you got to jump through these hoops if you actually want to get your license, because you committed some kind of violation of the rules. Now, historically, eligibility orders are very much public information. People can get them and do. We have not published that information. What kind of brought this issue up was the KXAN investigation into the medical board, and I've put the materials in your meeting packet materials there for your review. And I began to wonder, do we need to begin publishing eligibility orders so that members of the public know whenever they pull up a licensee, oh, this individual hasn't been disciplined, but when he applied for licensure, he had some sort of an eligibility order entered against him. I'm not so much worried about the KXAN investigation focused a lot on the medical board not making mention or making available out-of-state disciplinary actions against a doctor. I'm not as worried about that for us, because we do something called reciprocal discipline, which means when we find out that a licensee has been disciplined in another state, we enter a reciprocal discipline order. In other words, we look at what the conduct was in that other jurisdiction, and we say, okay, it would have been this violation for us, so therefore here's your reciprocal discipline order. And that is disciplinary, and that would be published on our website. So we're not quite in the same situation as the medical board there, but that eligibility issue came up, and I thought, I'm going to bring this to the council and kind of get y'all's take on what you want to do here. What do y'all think? What are y'all's thoughts on what we should do in this arena?
I think there's plenty of things that are public record that by government not publishing it and making it difficult to get, it effectively becomes not public information when it should be. That's been my personal experience.
Anybody else?
What are we really seeing with this, Daryl? I mean, are we talking about somebody that just didn't take the right number of courses?
No. This would be, say, an intern in actual training program, and they sleep with a patient, and then later on when they apply for their LPCA or something like that, that comes to light in some way, shape, or form, and we're like, whoa, wait a minute. Had you been licensed, we would have dinged you this way, but you don't have a license. We can't ding you for anything. So we're just going to tell you, you can't come into the profession until you meet this extra set of criteria. That's what an eligibility order is.
How many of those are we seeing?
Oh, I don't know, Dr. Taylor. I don't sign many. I can tell you anecdotally, I do not sign many of them.
Yeah, it seems to be very rare.
Yes, it is.
It's rare, but when it comes up, it's usually something pretty prickly and sticky and messy. And, thinking about this from kind of trying to look at it from all angles, the idea that, what will the board do? Number one, the board will do things in a certain way. And we all know that it's probably not going to see the light of day. However, if it's about to get published, how does that animate the board to drop the hammer on somebody maybe heavier, maybe as they should? What does it do to the public? Make sure the public has access to that information. And it's kind of one of those things. It's while it is public, publishing it shines a bright spotlight on it, which tends to be a pretty good disinfectant most times.
I agree.
I agree with you, John. My concern would be confusing the public. If it's a bunch of small stuff that's not important, I don't want the public being confused and not going to see a therapist because there's some order on there that they don't even understand what it means, and it was administrative at best. But if we're talking about the stuff that you described, Daryl, then yes, I think those things should be public, and that should be on the website.
Is there any other discussion? If not, could I hear that in the form of a motion?
Daryl, would you need a motion to begin publishing eligibility orders? Is that something we can do? Was it a discussion and possible action listed on the agenda?
Yeah, you can do it. What I'm trying to figure out is, I guess depending on how, I'm not sure I'll be able to, I can differentiate between, I understand what Dr. Taylor's saying is, but without some sort of objective criteria, somebody could accuse me of saying, okay, well, that should have been published, but it wasn't. Or it shouldn't have been published, but it was, is probably more likely what I'm going to get accused of. I guess I'm a little worried about how do I differentiate between what should or shouldn't.
I don't want to write a policy in an open meeting here. I mean, if we, because that usually gets, not that I don't want to do that, it just gets messy. Do we need to like propose a rule on this, or not a rule, or propose a policy, or just think about this a little more before we give you direction on it?
Or could we see a list of what disciplinary actions are?
Right, like sorry.
Go ahead.
For clarity,
I was going to say, essentially they're pending at this point. Like their application is pending. So like, I don't know like what it shows if it's at that point, but then we could have sort of a, you know, like we wouldn't list administrative, but like if it objectively did have like different selections of what those would be, like if it's a serious matter, then it would be listed on like within, when you click on that eligibility piece, or that on that pending piece, it would go into what that is. I don't know, it's kind of confusing to, basically, the way that I'm thinking about it is, like Dr. Taylor said, we wouldn't want like just menial little things listed, but if under that kind of pending status, you clicked on it and it was something that was disciplinary or serious, but again, like you would have to kind of know how to differentiate that. And it doesn't sound like it's happening a lot though, but if there was like sort of almost like a drop down of what those different offenses are, kind of like on the sanctions.
How is it differentiated for licensed license holders?
Well, we don't. Just all disciplinary orders are listed for the public. We don't differentiate. It may be a piddly administrative penalty for a couple $100 all the way up to revocation. That all gets listed without regard to what the nature or level of offense was.
Yeah, my question was more about clarifying the items that are being reviewed as the eligibility order. But if you're saying it's these are the cases that result in an eligibility order, then yeah, you know, we should probably be publishing those the same way we publish the disciplinary ones. I'm not suggesting that you have a qualifier that says this is when we publish them. I think it should be all or nothing. I mean, we either publish them.
Okay.
Be easier.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then that's much easier if yeah. I think that's basically what I'm hearing is that it's probably a good idea to go ahead and publish the eligibility orders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure they weren't like you know, the same thing as a deficiency notice.
Oh, no, sir. No. That's
No.
a totally different animal. Yeah,
that's silly. Like we don't want. I mean, everyone would probably like have something.
Right. And I'm not even talking about like what y'all would call a CLA. Psych would call it a remedial plan. We're not even talking about that. These are straight up orders that everybody has agreed that there was some sort of violation that occurred of a rule that had you been a licensee, you would have been sanctioned for.
This is reprimand or above.
Yes.
And due process has occurred.
Correct. Yeah, they go through the exact same, they get the exact same due process that a licensee gets whenever they're accused of violation.
I think I've been doing this 7 years now. I've yet to do one in an ISC or anything like that.
They may be kind of new to y'all. I'm not sure that y'all used eligibility orders before. I'll have to visit with Tim about that, but we used them at it's psych. They're really something that came over from psych board.
All that considered, I'm in agreement with it too. Then this should be published.
Okay.
Do we need to vote for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, just give me a motion.
I'd like to entertain a motion then to approve all the eligibility orders as part of our licensee search results and to publish them.
I'll second that order.
So I can't move, so maybe you just have to make the motion first.
I move to approve the eligibility order.
I will second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by raising your hands. Okay, that's everybody. Brian stepped away. Do you have the quorum for that?
Yeah, we've got quorum.
Okay, great. Any opposed, same sign? The motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you. The next is item 4F, report and possible action on recommendations from the 3-member travel policy work group. And so I'd like to thank Councilman Francis and Councilman Bilamowitz for helping with that. We have a policy that we've come up with, and you should have a copy of it for travel by council and board members. After submitting it, the final draft to Daryl, the one recommendation he had is on the 3rd point of the first paragraph that said board member attendance is limited to 1 member per meeting, and he recommended adding reimbursement for board member attendance would be limited to 1 member per meeting. I'm hoping all of you have this up, and please let me know if you have any questions instead of my reading the whole thing to you.
Just as an editorial comment, a lot of work went into this. Travel has been a thing that ends up putting agencies in the news for not good reasons. And this was written in a way to facilitate board members to get to where they need to be to conduct the business of Texas, with guardrails and checks and balances that make sure that we're being good custodians of that money as we make those decisions.
Thank you, John. Any other questions or concerns? And if not, may I have a motion to approve? Or
sorry, Chair, a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Daryl, LPC board is looking at designating certain subject matter experts as resource witnesses for potential testimony during the upcoming session. Could this apply to our designated resource witnesses, even if they are not board members?
No, the agency is not going to be able to pay for non-board members to attend legislative hearings. We can't do that.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I offer a motion to accept what has been proposed for the travel policy.
Thank you, George. May I have a second?
Madam Chair, just one clarification. Is that, Mr. Francis, is your motion with the recommended change I made on that last sentence of the 4th bullet? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve as changed by Daryl in that recommend reimbursement for board member attendance. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Okay, thank you so much. The vote's unanimous.
Okay.
And it is 11:41, so can I suggest a short break to reconvene at, shall we say, in half an hour, so that you can look at your emails and eat a little bit of lunch before we continue. Is that all right?
So 12:15.
12:15. It's 11:40 now, according to the screen. Okay, and I have to say that, right?
Yeah, we're just going to.
Okay, we're going to adjourn briefly. It's 11:40 a.m. on August 23rd, 2022.
And we'll be back
We'll be
at
back at 12:15.
12:15.
Thank you, everybody.
And I will pause the recording for members of the public. The webinar will continue to run. But we'll kill the camera and the microphone feeds, but the webinar will still continue to run, so you can just stay logged in. Okay, you are back live.
Thanks, everybody. It is 12:15 and we are beginning the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council meeting. The next item under consideration, the next few items are regarding rulemaking, and I'd like to take public comment now with regard to rulemaking. So if your comments are in this regard, we'd like to hear them. You please raise your hand feature so that we'll be able to call on you, and each of you has 3 minutes to speak. You'll get a 30-second warning before going to the next person. Again, if your comments are on rulemaking, we'd like to hear them now. All other comments, please hold until the item arises later in the meeting. And Daryl is going to manage that for us. Thanks, Daryl.
Okay, first up, we have Ms. Kathleen Mills. Ms. Mills, do you have public comments you'd like to give?
I do, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Mills, licensed professional counselor supervisor, owner of Lifetree Counseling Center, and partner in PracticeMentors.us. I submitted a very detailed written comment for your careful consideration a week ago. I'd like to focus on just 3 of those points in my allotted time. First, the playing field you're creating is not level. Your approved list ignores an entire class of CE providers, the independent stakeholders. Your 50% rule not only limits my CE course selection as a counselor, but as a CE provider, it renders my workshops pointless to any counselor who already has the non-approved provider list hours that they need. I'd like to know why I don't count in your calculations. Why do I have to belong to academia or an association to make the list? Second, I believe the multicultural training may have originally had its place, but it's been hijacked by the diversity people. The diversity campaign is a bucket with no lid into which anything the social policy drivers wish to normalize may be added, like social reassignment, genetic engineering, and a whole list of other topics. You know what I'm talking about, and I'm not okay with that. If Joe has a problem with his treatment by a counselor, then he has the complaint process at his disposal. If a counselor wishes to take a diversity course at an elective option, then that's his or her right to do so. I will not be silent about a small faction of social warriors insisting that there is something inherently biased in my spirit and that they know better what I need to fix me. I don't think anyone should be promoting a social agenda through our rule books. And third, you're proposing that 67% of my required hours be selected for me. I'll be taking a 24-hour CE class in the fall. It has everything to do with the direction I want my practice to take, but it's not on the approved provider list. So let's run the numbers and assume I have 0 CEs accumulated for the cycle, shall we? Because of your 50% rule, only 12 of these hours can be counted. But because I have only 8 elective hours, I can only count 8 of the 24. That leaves 16 hours I simply can't use for any credit at all in this renewal cycle. I can carry 10 of them forward to my next renewal period, but I'll lose the remaining 6 for good. And I can only use 8 of those 10 I carry forward. So what's the point of carrying 10? We are overburdened with regulations, codes, and guidelines, and I haven't heard one good argument for adding more. I think our CE rules are working just fine. Thank you very much. Keep politics and social agendas out of this profession and out of our rule books, please. Thank you.
She said she was a professional counselor. Is that right?
Yeah,
Thank you.
She's an LPC supervisor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. Okay, next up is Ms. Laurel Clement. Ms. Clement, did you have public comments you'd like to make?
Yes, I do. First of all, I do want to say thank you to Daryl Spinks. You've done an excellent job in administratively getting our therapy boards back on track. I greatly appreciate that. I also want to thank George Francis for his out of the therapy box comments. I always appreciate the comments that I hear from him. I do want to also thank John, and I wish I could pronounce your last name, but I will call you Mr. John, for bringing up the issue of abandonment. I think this brings up two comments that I would like to make regarding our rules. First of all is confidentiality. If a therapist has a criminal act that occurs by a client, they are not allowed by the rule book to report that particular action. As many of you know, I am an attorney. I represent many therapists throughout the state. When a therapist contacts me and says, my client slapped me, my client hit me, my client destroyed property in my waiting room, can I contact the police? What I have to tell them is there is a no allowance for them to break confidentiality and report the action to the police. The only allowance is for an imminent future threat. There is no break of confidentiality for them to protect themselves. In addition, I can recall last year a client meaning a therapist contacted me and said, my client left my office and keyed my car. Am I allowed to call the police? So not only were they not allowed to call the police, when they contacted their insurance company, they were not allowed to disclose to their insurance company who actually did the destruction. And either they had to not call the insurance company, or they had to lie to the insurance company and say they did not know the identity of the person. That brings up another issue, which is abandonment. When these kinds of actions occur, the therapist wants to refer out the particular client, who is it they're going to refer that case to? Right. Who's going to want to take that case? And why would you want to refer that person to another therapist when you knew that there was some danger involved, or maybe some sexual inappropriate activity that had occurred? Thank you, Patrick. I think in a medium or smaller city, that really eliminates the opportunities for referral. And I think that it really creates problems that there is not some sort of rule or guideline for that referral to be made. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Clement.
Rhonda Kimball, did you have public comments you'd like to make?
Yes, I do. Thanks so much. Several issues. I agree with Ms. Mills wholeheartedly. The day you guys or anybody else starts paying for my CEs is the day that you get to have input as to the scope of my practice. I'm telling you that right off the bat. I will study what I want to study. I'm an LPC. I come to the table with specialties. I'm a trauma specialist. You don't have input for me. I will choose the scope of my practice. I have never, ever reneged my personal responsibility or my personal rights to become a professional counselor. This is totally overstepping. I'm also a Christian counselor, and you're talking about conversion therapy. Daryl, you talked about earlier. Listen, conversion therapy goes both ways. It is not in my scope, because I believe in what the Bible says about, say, homosexuality, transgender. I am not your counselor. It would be wrong for me to take on cases like that. But also, I've heard Christian counselors say, oh, it's my privilege to counsel with Christian men and bring them out of the closet. It goes both ways. And so we need to watch it, because you don't know what's going on in the room. We are also subject to our liability insurance. Our premiums are low. Why? Because we're dealing with a portion of the population that are hopeless, helpless, mentally challenged. We do this operating in our giftings to bring something to society. We don't need to be regulated by some people that aren't even in this profession, number one. We need some backup. We need advocates on our side as well. This is not a healthy population that we deal with. Abandonment issues, attachment issues, that is a whole bit of our science. That is a big problem that these people have because of abusive parents and whatnot. So, it's just such a humongous, it's just hard to nail it down. But I think what we can stand on is, one, if we have competent counselors, if you can't pass your test after the third time, you need to go back to school, especially with all the crap regulation and the standardization. If you can't pass a test, then you shouldn't be a counselor. Let's nip it in the bud in the beginning so that we don't have to over-regulate and overstep a counselor's personal responsibility. Hold on, Patrick. This is why you're never going to meet that revenue of renewals for licenses, because everybody's going to be a coach. Why? It's unregulated. But it doesn't mean they're any more qualified than me or anyone else. And talking about this equity business, because that's what it was. I'm Mexican. I was 57 when I took my test and passed the first time. So please stop telling me because I'm a different race that I'm not smart. If you study, you can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kimball.
Mr. Crum, did you have public comments you'd like to make?
Yes, sir, but I didn't want to follow that act. That's pretty good. My name's Philip Crum. I'm speaking on my own behalf as a business owner, Practice Mentors, which I operate with Kathleen Mills, who just spoke. And I wholeheartedly second Rhonda Kimball's sentiments, by the way. Kudos to John B. for his recommendation to reinstate the live debate factor to these meetings. I think it's missing, and he made an entire point for me. I appreciate it. The Sunset Commission moved us away from dishes, tasked BHEC with cleaning up the mess, including the backlog of complaints, and Daryl Spinks and his team have very successfully done that. The number one cause of complaints 2 years ago was the improper release of records. The BHEC team recognized that and saw fit to publish the entire 8 pages of code on that topic in your rule books. That tells me they think it's an important problem to be dealing with. So my business developed an all-day workshop on this single subject to address the issue as well. Now, why that's important is because your 50% rule and the approved provider list will effectively eliminate probably half of my potential audience for all of our workshops, and I'm not okay with that. Kathleen gave you an accurate example of how convoluted the math behind these renewal guidelines would be. I want to give you another scenario that's going to damage my business and a few questions that haven't been addressed. A counselor wants to become a supervisor and take the required 40-hour workshop from me, a non-approved second-class provider. Do all of the hours count towards supervisor status, or only 20 of them because of the 50% rule? If I'm a duly credentialed LPC, MFT, do I now have to take 2 40-hour training courses to be able to supervise both LPC and MFTs? Because that's what your text suggests. And for my own clarity, I'd like to know, why does a counselor have to find an approved provider at all to take the training if I'm following the same set of guidelines from the same rule book that your provider friends are working from? Somebody please explain that to me. Now, here's the irony in all of this. Despite the massive sunset upheaval in oversight your professions just went through, you're passing regulations today that will undermine specific efforts the Sunset Commission, BHEC, and private sector are trying to address. You're swinging the pendulum of regulation back towards the complexity issues we're still trying to correct and get away from. You're putting my business and that of hundreds of other independent stakeholders, hundreds of us, that provide CE offerings. You're putting us in jeopardy with this proposal. I hope you'll reconsider the vote you just took, or excuse me, that you're about to take. 95% of the licensees have no idea you're passing this thing right now.
30 seconds.
You're only hearing from the vocal 2%. So pass this thing and the backlash has only begun. I'm telling you, send this thing back down to their respective boards for further consideration with these larger points in mind. What's your hurry? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crum.
Mr. Francis, did you have public comments you'd like to give?
Yes, my name is Will Francis. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Social Workers Texas chapter. I appreciate those who've commented before me. I guess I'm a little confused since I don't see any LPC rules up for debate today, so I'm not entirely sure where the concern is coming from. For the social work rules that we do have, I can share that we spoke at our board meeting regarding these, and we conducted a survey. We reached out to many social workers across Texas, both members of NASW and those who are not members of NASW. And overall, the feedback that we got was that there is great support for cultural competency and diversity. People feel very strongly that that's, as written, a very wide subject, and that if there are areas that you find to be controversial, you do not have to go and receive education in those areas. And so very much appreciated the board guidance. There was support for the increase of the supervision. We did ask that language be added that cover theory, skills, strategies, and or evaluation. That was not put in the rules. We would appreciate that. I think a little bit more guidance to go from 3 to 6 is important. We did get support for the jurisprudence change. I will say that the way, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I read the rules is it looks like it says 1 hour for the jurisprudence exam. The social work exam is currently 3 hours in jurisprudence. It would be great if you just did a 1-for-1, so that if we maintain a 3-hour exam, it still counts as 3 hours of ethics, which would be great. And then we did, the most controversial one was the 50-50 rule on where it should come from. Overall, we did have support in both our live webinar and to our survey, and I'd be happy to share those results, that people did support the change to require 50% come from certain area and then 50% from other area. They felt that it at least aligned with what previously was in place, which was a board certifying providers. The final piece, I guess, was the piece about the bachelor's rules, but I believe that was changed. So I appreciate the opportunity to comment today, and overall, the social work community is in support of this rule change.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Ms. Martin, did you have public comments you'd like to give? Sandra?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I didn't know I was going to get this early in line. I wanted to listen a little bit more, but I'll go ahead. Christian Counselors of Texas. I'm governmental liaison for Christian Counselors of Texas. I'm probably about to make several enemies that I haven't had in the past. We support these proposals. First of all, the approved providers are not approved in the way that we used to hear approved. The same process does not happen. There are 6 categories, as I see it, there are 6 categories of providers, and in those 6 categories are 18 different entities from which you can get your 50% of CEUs. The advantage in that is that there are auditors who are going to be auditing this, there are staff members that are going to be passing on these CEUs as to whether they're valid or not. And the fact that we get them in some kind of framework, because these staff members are not counselors, if we get them in some kind of framework, we're going to be pretty sure that they'll go through. Not certain, but pretty sure. So there's no reason that I can see to be concerned about the 50-50. If you're afraid that you're going to take 12 of ours, LPCs, 12, with the provider of your choice, whoever that may be, and then be forced, I think it's been put, be forced to take the other 50%, the other 12 from one of these, well, then take these 12 first. And then after that, you can take as many CEUs as you want, and you can take them from whoever you want. In terms of the cultural diversity, we have a history with that, and we have strong opinions. But as I wrote in a newsletter to our guys, there are lots of cultures in Texas. If there's one that you're just not good with and you're just not in sympathy with, then find another one. There are lots of cultures in Texas. We're just rife with cultures we can pick from for that cultural diversity problem. What else is on there? Let's see. And actually, somebody that's not in that list, you can get someone that's on that list to endorse you. There are hospitals, there are governments, there are educational institutions. You can get someone to endorse you. There is an avenue for that. So there are lots of ways to skin a cat. And Christian Counselors of Texas is not opposed to this. In fact, I'll just add just add an edge, we would like to see us have more, because we have the least, thank you, the least CEUs of any board. So we would like to see a greater number.
30 seconds.
Our degrees to be valued, our licenses to be valued. Thank you so much. Sorry I ran over.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. All right, that's all the hands raised, and there are no phone numbers. So that is all the public comment for the rulemaking prior to delving into that.
Thank you so much. Let's proceed then to item 5, rulemaking for the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council. We have nothing under 5A, which is a review of proposed rule changes. We do have 3 under 5B, consideration and possible adoption of the following proposed rule changes, and I'll ask Daryl to go through them for us.
Okay, they're really all, the first one, 882.2 and 884.20 are, I think, Patrick, are they typographical or just minor, really non-substantive type changes?
They're to allow us to do the NPDB by the PDF, the electronic version instead of the paper.
Yeah. Right now, when people submit their NPDB report, they have to submit it in the sealed envelope that it comes from the National Practitioner Data Bank. We want to be able to use the certified PDF that they send out. It's just a lot faster. And people always inadvertently open that envelope, which then negates its utility, and they have to redo it. So this is something, honestly, we're already accepting it. We really need the rule to catch up with our practice. So that's something that we're, and there's no opposition to this. There haven't been any comments in opposition to this. I don't really have anything to add on all the rules. They're just, I think they're self-evident, the changes that have been proposed.
And the other one is typographical.
Yeah.
Any discussion? Then do I hear a motion to approve 5B, the 3 rules concerning general application file requirements, reinstatement of a license, and disciplinary guidelines in the general schedule of sanctions?
I so move, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Second. All in favor signify by raising your hands. Motion passes. Any opposed? Sorry, any opposed, same sign. Motion passes with 1 abstaining, Ms. Rogers.
Okay.
Okay. The next item is for the Board of Examiners of Marriage and Family Therapists. Items 1 and 2 are, I'm sorry, I'm going on 2 pages here.
You're at 1 and 2.
1 and 2. Consideration, go ahead.
I was going to say 1 and 2 are the proposed rules coming up from the MFT board. One thing I would point out on 801.143, that is a proposed rule that it's also a rule in which you have an adopted change before you. So you'll see some highlighting in that rule. Really what Patrick and I are trying to do here is we're trying to tell you, if you adopt the changes below, we need to adopt the changes below under the adoption section, and then we can repropose that rule with the new changes that the MFT board has sent up. So I would recommend holding off on 801.143 for right now and just consider 801.142. And then we'll take up 143 after y'all tackle the adoption rules below. So really, let's just do 1 right now, 801.142.
And that's the typographical?
Yes.
Okay.
And when it's review and consideration, is it to propose them for adoption?
Yes, ma'am. These are being proposed for adoption. I'm sorry, these are being proposed in the Texas Register, not for adoption.
Texas Register, okay.
Yes.
Any discussion where this is concerned, particularly from a member of the board?
No discussion, but Madam Chair, I would make a motion to accept 801.142.
Thank you, George. Second?
Second.
I'm sorry, that was Dr. Cartwright.
Yes, ma'am, Dr.
Mark,
Cartwright.
thank you, Mark. Signify by raising your hands. Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed, same sign. It's passed unanimously.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
then moving on to the adopted versions, this is the rules package. Patrick, all of these are changes being considered because of this standardized CE rule, correct?
Most of them except for 44, 801-44
Yes.
doesn't relate to that CE rule. There's some additional language there that's talking about emerging areas.
44 deals with the MFT board is basically copying something that the site board has had for quite a while. It's just a rule change that says, look, if you're working in an emerging area, you need to study up on it as best you can before you launch off into delivering services in that area. I don't think there weren't any comments on this particular rule. So
do you want to take them as a group though?
I just take them as a group. Okay. And then the remainder of the rules, 801.58 through 801.266. These are all changes that are necessary if we adopt the new standardized rule in 801.261. In other words, the new standardized CE rule that we received so many public comments on a second ago. Dr. Taylor?
George, since Janine isn't here, can you give me insight into the public comments you guys have seen on this topic of continuing education?
We haven't seen that much, actually. And so I was actually kind of surprised to hear the comments today. They have not come through the MFT board nearly as much as they showed up here today. So there was actually no whole lot of discussion around this. It was unanimous from the MFT board.
Okay.
From my perspective, I thought that the comments primarily came from LPC board. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct. And we, at our previous BHEC meeting, we sent that back down to the LPC board for additional discussion. And so it's not being considered today. We're going to tackle it at our next meeting.
Okay, good. So we get down to that section, we can address it. In terms of MFT, then you did not hear many objections, okay, it wasn't as much.
No.
All right.
So, Daryl, are you recommending we take this in two parts, 801.44, a separate motion, then 801.58 through 801.266?
No, sir. I would recommend if unless there is some debate or dissent about the adopting the standardized continuing education rule that came up from MFT board, you can just take them all in one fell motion.
All of item B.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, we make a motion to take all of 801, to take all of item B as stated.
Hang on. Does Patrick have something?
I'm sorry.
I'm curious what Patrick's been raising his hand. I'm curious if he has something to add to this.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, did you want to point out where there was a typo correction we made in one of the public materials for that the word licensee was accidentally omitted, and we put it back in and supplemented the board materials, but the public ones didn't have that, just to make it crystal clear. That's what we came through with the board. And I believe the board voted to change in 261 F6, it should say graduate level licensee.
Hold on, Patrick. Let me just share it so they can see it. Yeah, the board. Okay, you see where it says a graduate level licensee here? The initial version that I sent to all the council members didn't have that word licensee, but the version that was recommended from the MFT board did contain licensee. Staff just inadvertently left that word out when I sent you your initial meeting materials. I'm not adding a word that the MFT board didn't already agree to or put in there. I just was letting y'all know, hey, we goofed. We left out that word in the version I sent to y'all as the council. We need to make sure that it's in there, and that's what I've done there. So we're not trying to sneak anything in, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, and I think another thing to make clear is on items 4 and 5. On the requirements for continuing education, one is with board edits and one is repeal. Is that right? An adopted, yeah.
Well, yes, I mean the board edits, the 801.261 is a brand new rule that we would be adopting. And then we're going to repeal all the existing continuing education rules so that they're not duplicative or conflicting with the new.
Got it, thank you. You have a motion on the table for Mr. Francis to approve items B, I through, or 1 through 7. Is there a second?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll have discussion right after that.
Okay.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, discussion? Mr. Halber? Stephen?
I reviewed the written comments from the LMFTs on this, and it's similar to what we're seeing on the LPC side, and that's concern about unnecessary complication and getting back into kind of regulating the CE providers. But I heard from Mr. Francis that there really isn't kind of that vocal opposition at LMFT. So kind of what's the difference here? Is this typical for, is this very similar to what they've been doing, or are we just kind of hearing more opposition on the LPC side? And so I just wanted to know, since those written comments were similar to what, I'm seeing for LPCs, but George is saying that there's not a big vocal opposition. So is it just, LMFTs are accustomed to this already? Is that?
No, the MFTs don't have the 50% requirement either. This would be a new requirement for them. Their rules are set up somewhat similar to how the LPC rules are currently set up as well. So it would be a change for them. MFTs have a few additions that LPCs don't have that we don't need to go into for purposes of this discussion. But I think I agree with George. When you look back at the meeting, you won't see there wasn't a lot of vocal opposition to this proposed change. I think what we're seeing here is kind of a spillover effect. You've got an element of the LPC community that has identified this rule as being problematic for them. And because there is so much cross-pollination between MFTs and LPCs, that you're kind of seeing this spillover. They're like, look, this rule is going to go into effect for all these professions, and some of us hold dual licensure. And so I think they're probably expressing some of those same concerns that they initially developed for the LPC license, and they're kind of transferring it over to the MFT now. Because in all honesty, with the BHEC rulemaking process, people get way more bites at the apple on giving public comment than they ever did before. You get 3 times as much opportunity to give public comment under BHEC than you would have had beforehand. So I think you're seeing people take advantage of those opportunities, not take advantage in a bad way, but utilize those opportunities.
And didn't the governor's office signed off on all these as well, and their rule review, did they not?
Correct. One of the things that Patrick and I, when we initially, when this proposed rule came up, when the LPC rules were first under consideration by BHEC for proposal, there was a lot of pushback. And some of the concern was, hey, this is anti-competitive because of some of the exact reasoning and argument that Ms. Mills and Mr. Crum made, in that right now our business can operate by, somebody can come to our business and get their entirety of their CE rules from us. But once this rule comes into effect, we won't be able to do that. So what Patrick and I did is we said, you know what, in addition to the council giving it the green light, let's go ahead and run it through the regulatory compliance division at the governor's office. So we did that. And the division said, yes, we can see how it might cut into the business of some, but you clearly have the statutory authority to do this. And that's really the crux when you're doing an anti-competitive analysis. It's not so much that it's anti-competitive, it's, do you have the authority to do it? And all the boards very clearly have the authority to regulate continuing education by their licensees. So that's really kind of the reason why we got a green light from the regulatory compliance division. Now, a green light from them doesn't mean you have to do it. It's just saying that we've reviewed it. We agree you have the statutory authority, and we don't think it's anti-competitive under federal law or under state law. So, but it's not a edict that you have to do it.
Right.
It's also not specified under LMFT that they have to go to a particular agency or particular providers.
Right. The whole 50% rule thing, it came from psychology, and it was the intention behind it is to offset the loss of the approved CE providers that you all had when you were over at HHSC. You used to approve your CE providers. So in theory, you knew the types of programs that people were getting and the quality of the program. That went away. And so this was kind of a compromise to get you back there to some degree. It's something that had worked at psychology and is still working. And it allowed for, we thought it allowed for a large degree of flexibility. The MFT board actually expanded it even further by saying, okay, well, we want to include supervisors, individuals with supervisory status in that list of approved providers. So if you're an LPC supervisor, if you're an LCSW with supervisory status, if you're a psychologist, you can provide under that as well. So both the MFT and social work board took steps in response to some of these comments to expand the number of quote unquote approved providers. But you do still, I mean, I can't deny the argument of, yes, there are going to be some businesses that don't fall into any of those categories. And if they choose not to go get their program endorsed by a provider in that list, then they are going to be relegated to the non-approved, the list. So that's a poor way of saying that, but I know y'all understand what I'm saying.
Okay. And Daryl, I think we're going to, when LPC takes this up on the 9th, I think we're going to maybe discuss a little bit more about what would be involved with being endorsed. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's all back on the table. The LPC rules are. So
okay.
Everything is up for grabs again.
So we're
all
back.
Right. Thank you for allowing that discussion.
Of course. If there's no other discussion, we have a motion and a second on the table for approval of items 6B, 1 through 7. If there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion. I'll ask for a vote. Is there any other discussion? Then I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor of approving items 7A, 1 through, did I get the right one? Yeah. 7B. 6B, sorry. 6B, items 1 through 7. Signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Same sign. Okay, the motion passes with 1 abstaining. Ms. Rogers.
Okay.
Asia, if I'm not seeing your hand, please let me know. Thank you. Okay, so we're on item 7. Do you want to take that for psychology?
Sure. This is the psychology rules are really a product.
I apologize for interrupting. Are we missing 801.143?
Oh, yes, yes. Ooh,
oh yeah, thank you.
That. Yes, we need to vote on 801.143, the proposed supervisor requirements.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept it as proposed, 801.143, item A2.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify by raising your hand. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes.
Sorry for that intrusion.
Oh, not at all.
Oh, very well.
Thanks for bringing it to our attention with 1 abstaining, Ms. Rogers.
Okay.
Chair Canseco and Director Spinks, if possible, I have a 1 o'clock campus. It's the week back to school for us. I have to go to a meeting. I can be a little late if we wanted to, if it's possible to go out of order and take the social work number 9.
Sure, that's fine. Sure, absolutely. Will that break a quorum?
No.
Okay. Let's go down to item 9, review and consideration of 2 proposed rule changes.
And again, like the MFT rules, we need to hold off on 781.404 because it's contingent upon the council adopting changes to that same rule under B. So really, let's just focus on 781.303, general standards of practice.
Any discussion? May I have a motion to approve item 9A1, general standards of practice?
Madam Chair, I offer up a motion to accept those, please.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. And the motion passes. Unanimous vote. Ms. Rogers abstaining. Item B for this. Items 1 through 6. 9B. And these are for adoption. Is there any discussion? Anything you want to bring to our attention, Mr. Brumley?
No, ma'am. These have been reviewed by our board and committee and are provided in your notes there. So yeah, we do support it.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve? Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. There's been approved and seconded. Is there any discussion or questions in this regard? Okay, all in favor signify by raising your hands. Any opposed? Same sign. The motion passes with one opposing.
With one opposed. Okay. And then we have 781.404 now.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to accept 781.404.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Sorry, raising your hand. Sorry about that.
We knew it.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. That passes unanimously with Ms. Rogers abstaining. And then we're back up to, thank you, Brian. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And I'll be leaving now. So thank y'all.
Sure, appreciate it. We are back to item 7. Do you want to go over those with us?
Sure.
Anything in particular?
This is a pretty substantive rule change package. A lot of this came out of the dive that the psychology board has done beginning at its June 30th meeting. Trying to figure the psychology board has begun a process where they are taking a long, hard look at the rules to see what, if anything, are we doing that is hindering entrance into the profession? What can we do to remediate, the impact of our rules there, or change our rules so that we don't needlessly have a barrier on entry into the profession? And then you have rules like 463.15, which is kind of a cleanup rule. That's something that Patrick had asked to be done, but it's a pretty substantive rule change package that's been debated very heavily at the psychology board and is being proposed. We're honestly looking for public comment on these rules. This is not a perfunctory matter. We're putting it out there so that we can get some feedback from the public. But Chair Belemowitz, Dr. Cartwright, if y'all have anything you want to add.
Yeah, there's sort of, I think there's another agenda item for a report from us on the meeting. I can talk about that with a little bit more color later, but candidly, this is the work product of that. It was, the special meeting was a little bit uncomfortable because essentially everybody had a sacred cow that was sort of on the altar, and we didn't necessarily say we're all going to slaughter, but everything got talked about. And what you see here is, again, the work product of a lot of that. Again, a lot of thanks and gratitude to everybody who commented on it. There's a lot you don't see here because we came up with some bad ideas too that didn't make it into this package. So really kudos to everybody for having the courage to step up and talk about it. There's the biggest gist, if I had to summarize everything here, the biggest gist of the things that we're trying to balance are protection of standards, like not lowering standards, while also decreasing unnecessary barriers, which barriers and standards are sometimes the same. They're often not the same things. And so balancing those two things is really what animated most of our discussion. Daryl, not all of these are, a lot of these are proposed still. So not all of these are for adoption.
All of proposed rules.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, this is, we ain't done with this stuff. But this is part of the messy process of rulemaking that we're going to keep talking about it. But I think, and I'll let Dr. Cartwright speak as well as a professional member, I think all of this represents A lot of hard work that when somebody asks us, like, what have we been up to in trying to increase access to for mental health for rural Texas and all Texans, this is what we're working on. So, Dr. Cartwright, do you have anything?
I mean, you summed it up very well. You summed it up well, John. And I think, we're just still under discussion on everything. And again, as you mentioned, just trying to work on balancing standards along with considering barriers as well into the profession. So the public comment has been excellent. We've really appreciated it. And we're just taking everything into consideration and, working on fine tuning all of this up to make some good rules. But a lot of this is at rulemaking right now, and we're continuing that process. So we appreciate everybody's feedback, public comment, and everyone else on the board, on the psychology board, has done such a good job. So appreciate it.
Amen.
Great. And we need a motion to approve them in order for them,
Yes,
for the
ma'am.
psych board to continue.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any other discussion? I think Patrick has something.
Yeah, do you want to also in D3 and 463.9, there was a typo correction or a maybe a clarification?
Oh, yes.
Teaching course to program.
Where would I be without
63
Patrick
now.
keeping me in line here today? Where were you at when I forgot to start the recording, Patrick? Let me share the screen here and I'll show you what staff are recommending here. Okay, this on what is it, D3 here? This paragraph, it uses the word graduate level training course. What I'm recommending is the council go ahead and substitute the word program. I think you can do this, and it doesn't, I'm not concerned about it. It certainly doesn't change the impact or the intent of the rule. But what I want to avoid is somebody looking at that and going, oh, I just have to take one course, get this certificate after taking one course, and then I will fall under the auspices of the rule. That is not what the board intended when it sent this rule up. That's just a poor word choice on my part when I plugged in the word course. I think program is the more appropriate term to use there. And so I would recommend that the council use its non-substantive edit authority and exchange the word program for course. I will tell you another reason why I'm not worried about it, and I don't think the psychology board is going to take offense at our doing it, is if they don't like that, I'll point it out to them. They can change it back to course when it comes back after public comment. So it's a no harm, no foul type deal. And I'd rather do it right now on the front end of public comment than on the back end. So
it's a course of study, not a class.
Correct. That's correct. So that's the only change I would recommend that you make.
Okay, looks good. Do I have a motion to adopt the following, to consider and adopt the following proposed changes for
move to approve with that edit that Daryl just pointed out.
Second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying, oh, sorry, is there any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hands. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes with a majority vote with Ms. Rogers abstaining.
Okay.
And so let's keep going. We're on item 10. Am I right? If I skipped anything, Patrick? He left.
Nope, you're right. You're on 10.
Okay, good. John, go ahead. Tell us about your exciting meeting in June.
Well, it was
exciting.
Exciting. Yeah, I call it a lot of things. It was exciting. It was a lot of people didn't know what to think coming into it. The backdrop of it, I think, was Uvalde. There's so much more to tackling rural mental health care than that incident, that horrible incident. I don't even know where to start. Everybody, and I sort of already mentioned it. The letter that I wrote to my board said, come to Austin with your thinking caps and let's figure out what part of this do we own. Solving the mental health. I don't anticipate any time where we're just going to say mission accomplished. We've solved the mental health crisis in this country or in this state. It just ain't going to happen. But the backdrop for what animated us was that we're going to go find the 5%, 10% of this problem that we can own and impact And we're going to do that. And we're going to look back and say, we've done our little part. There's a lot of this stuff that we're going to bump our head against statutory issues that are outside our wheelhouse that we're not going to get in the business of advocating for, lobbying for, or against. But I'm in the process of this. I am not afraid to bump my head against those statutory limits. And when we do, I'm going to not be necessarily shy to say that's statutory. That's for the legislature. You know, they're coming in session in a few months. And if they care to take some of those things up, then I'm confident they will. But in the meantime, as a regulatory board, you know, the Texas legislature only meets 6 months out of every 2 years. In the interim, it's up to us to do what we can with rulemaking, in the limited scope that we can influence. And beyond that, we're going to leave it to the legislature. So we've all come to it with that spirit. Again, there's been we've been unafraid of a prickly discussion. We haven't fallen in too many cactuses. When we bumped up against them, we pick them out and we keep on going. And so I've been very proud of what we've accomplished thus far. There's still more to do. And I would defer to Dr. Cartwright here if our professional member has anything he wants to add about it from his perspective.
And before I call on Dr. Cartwright, you did use prickly 3 times at the meeting so far as a metaphor. So it sounds like it couldn't have been too easy. Dr. Cartwright.
I mean, John summed it up really well. We've just had very constructive discussions, and you know, being able to meet in person, I think was really helpful too, and to just bring everything to the table. Obviously, there's just so much concern in this country about, you know, access to care, and the Uvalde tragedy was just eye-awakening. And I mean, I think we know it's happening all over the country. And so I think bringing some of these topics to the table, having discussion about it, you know, we brought things to the table that we didn't know if it was statutory but it was, you know, it was worth discussing as a board. And obviously there's limitations on what we can do and what we can't do. But I think just kind of bringing all of that to the table, listening to the public comment that we had at the June 30th meeting was excellent as well. And so again, I think the continuing discussions of how we can improve as a state and improve our mental health services overall to our citizens is what we're trying to accomplish. And Texas is such a complex state in that it's so big. There's so much rural area. There's so much population concentrated in certain areas, and then very, very rural in other areas. We have so many counties where we don't have a psychologist at all in multiple counties in Texas. So again, just bringing these ideas to the table, discussing, taking it, you know, considering from a rules perspective what we can and can't do. I think it's ongoing. So we're still working on it, and we appreciate everyone's insight into this, and everyone, again, the comments. And John, you've done a fantastic job as chair of the board, and we appreciate everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to close it, just kind of a preview looking forward of I think where you're going to see us really taking concrete action on rules in terms of expanding not only the number of practitioners, but where and how they practice. Understanding that it takes, you know, to mint from taking somebody from high school to college, it's going to be no quicker essentially than 8 years to mint a newly minted psychologist. So if we did everything right, it would take us nearly a decade to actually put a dent in this. And so that's why we're really looking at the LSSPs. And then also taking a look at what the heck do we call an LSSP? Because everybody seems to refer to them as school psychologists. And doing what we can to educate not just the public, but also stakeholders within education, and getting people to know what a school psychologist does. And then also looking at who gets to be a school psychologist, both in education and what's that licensing runway look like. So that's what you guys are voting for today. And I appreciate the fact that we're advancing the ball on those items. So thanks again.
And the other thing related to the schools is that, you know, there are schools in every county, and it is a way to have some sort of access to mental health. And so we're, you know, trying to, in light of that, trying to increase accessibility and understanding that is a conduit of where we can provide services potentially, and helping maybe facilitate that. So just, again, ideas being thrown out. And to John's point about the school psychologist, in 48 other states, it's called a school psychologist, an LSSP. What an LSSP is in Texas is called a school psychologist, and it can become ambiguous. It can become confusing. So we're trying to simplify there in Texas. So just to kind of clarify on that.
And if I might weigh in as your chair, naturally, just after, well, actually in the moment that I found out what had happened, I made a couple of calls. Not many of you know that I am not only Latina, but I'm also from Laredo for generations and generations, and probably before the state was the state of Texas. But as a result, there were cultural limitations in Uvalde. I'd love to see us talk about that. I must say, disappointed in the response that I received from Health and Human Services, despite the fact that I worked hard to quickly assemble a team of different behavioral health professionals who were also bilingual and bicultural. I got a call and I never got follow-up. Now, that was not in my professional role, but I believe it's representative of why all of us are serving on BHEC today in the interests of the psychological health of our state by providing professional, efficient, and many of them, enough of them to make sure that the ratio of need to provider is met. I was disappointed, and we're all facing this tragedy. And if I'm disappointed just as a person, that's not such a big deal. But I can't imagine the number of Texans who expected better of us where that's concerned. So John, I applaud you for taking a difficult issue and going, frankly, for lack of a better metaphor, you ran to the bomb. And I'm deeply appreciative as a person and as a citizen of the state of Texas.
Credit my board. I just called a meeting and credit my board because we all tackled some very tough things and they came with their A game. And so credit the board, please.
Please thank them on behalf of our board and let us know
I'll pass it on.
what more we can do to help.
Yeah, John, I'd like to echo what Chair Seiko said there. The LPCs are kind of observing y'all's methodology on this, taking a look at what is possible. And I give you credit because you guys have really dug in on the prickly issues, as you like to call them. And we appreciate you kind of move, what do they say, move fast and break stuff? Well, you guys have moved fast. And I think the things that you're breaking, I think that you're doing so for the right reasons, and it's going to produce a good result. But on behalf of the LPCs, we're not just standing aside and just doing the same old thing. We're very, very interested in what you are tackling, and you and I have had conversations, and I've had conversations with Daryl, and we're taking a look at what can we do. I'm a very much a what is possible type of person, and I know Daryl is working on that on behalf of the LPCs, but you're out there in the chemistry lab making it happen, and I'm grateful for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. I think that's the last item on our agenda for the council. We still have general public comments.
Unless there were any other reports from, well, there's nobody from the MFT, but from, I guess if Ms. Rogers had anything she wanted to mention on the social work.
Ms. Rogers, is there anything that you have on your mind?
Okay.
I do not have anything on my mind.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for being here, and let's open this up. Are there any other public comments?
Well, was there anything on the agenda that, anything that anybody wanted to see on the agenda next go around?
You know, honestly, I'd love to hear a follow-up from the next prickly meeting of the psych board. And if there are any others of you who are talking about these kinds of changes, tackling tough issues, I'd love to hear that as well. Mr. Hopper, Stephen, it looks like we've got some.
Daryl, when did bills start getting filed?
Oh,
I mean, it's usually pretty before the session, isn't it?
yeah, there's a pre-file period. Chair Hallbauer, I cannot remember off the top of my head.
No, it's not important, but I would, since that next BHEC meeting will be the last one prior to the start of the session, I've just, if there's anything that's already on your radar at that point, just kind of give us a heads up. And like you did a couple of years ago, I'd like to be included on the list of stuff that you're watching.
Yeah, that I'm okay. The bill list I'm watching.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll do it. I'll probably just include all the chairs, whether they want it or not, and they can tell me to unsubscribe.
I'm opting in.
Okay.
My favorite from last time was that Daryl mentioned that they wanted to get rid of daylight savings time, and yeah. I love how I guess that does affect everyone's mental health. So point taken.
Yeah, I'm for it. I'm for it. In case anyone wants to know.
In our personal capacity.
Yeah. Thank you. What's next?
Public comment.
Any public comment on anything that has nothing to do with rulemaking, since we've gotten through that?
All right, Ms. Freeze, you have public comments you'd like to make?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm Jan Freeze. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Counseling Association. First and foremost, and as always, I really want to express our deep appreciation to each of you for volunteering your time for the really important work that you do. I think protecting the mental health and reinforcing access to care for people who need it across the state of Texas is really noble. And I know that this takes an inordinate amount of your time. So I really want to thank you very, very much for that. I do want to, I wished that we had had the opportunity to see the policy recommendation on board travel. TCA has always been very supportive of having board members come and participate and present at our conferences. It's been a huge opportunity and benefit both to the board and to our members. And we didn't get to see that. I couldn't find the policy in the board meeting documents, so I can't really comment on it one way or the other, but I sure would have liked to have had that opportunity. And I think it goes back again to my concern that I've expressed in the past about providing opportunities well in advance of meetings for your stakeholders to be aware of the policies and recommend policies and procedures and rules that you're recommending, so that we have opportunity to thoughtfully and constructively engage with you to come up with really good solutions. I do want to speak, I'm not speaking on the rules so much, but I do have a comment to make about the discussion that just took place regarding continuing education. You know, I pulled up your mission. And your mission is to protect and promote the welfare of the people of Texas. And I want to encourage you that as you are considering the continuing education requirements for the people who are delivering services, your highest consideration should be ensuring that these professionals are well prepared. It is not your responsibility to protect the business of people who have elected to go into the business of delivering continuing education. Providing members with diversity that they can feel assured are well qualified and that the presenters are well prepared is an important function of your board. So I really commend the other boards that have moved forward with adoption of those rules. And to Stephen and Chris, we'll be seeing you at our meeting, because we're going to be pushing really hard to ensure that our rules come back on the table too, so that people who are seeing LPCs can be assured that they're well trained and prepared. Thanks, Patrick. Sorry.
30 seconds.
Just as a quick response, is it all right to send or publish our travel policy?
Yeah, it's public. It'll be public.
It'll be made public, and we'll pass it along. Thanks so much for that note.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jan. You and I are going to get ready for the next meeting. Steve, Just like pull an all-nighter, or do you just want to start working now, or what?
If I leave right now, I can be in Broken Bow at what, about 7 o'clock? I trust you still have plenty of scotch in the cabin. All right, let's move on.
All right, Mr. Francis, did you have public comments you'd like to make?
Yes, my name is Will Francis. I'm the Executive Director for NASW Texas. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again and again. As Jan said, thanks you all for the hard work you do. I know it's tough. A couple of points of order. One, pre-filing does begin on November 14th. And then Daryl said earlier that the first 60 days you couldn't file a bill. It's no committee hearings, Daryl. And normally I wouldn't say anything, but if I can correct a lawyer, I will do that. I would say that at the beginning of the meeting, you all discussed the funds and the dollars. It's wonderful to hear that there's some unspent funds. I know you want to spend them. You guys tabled the discussion to lower the fees last time. I would love it if you brought that back again. The fact that there are still dollars there and the fact that we're raising dollars as a BHAC is wonderful. But the governor said, let's try to bring these down to 75%. The Rules Fees Committee put some numbers in front of y'all, and those were tabled and those were not adopted. And I still hear people across Texas, especially social workers, really have concerns about the cost of a license and how that's a barrier and how there are, quite frankly, cultural issues around that as well, and disproportionality issues around some of those costs, especially when social workers have bachelor's level and others. So I would love to see the fees come back. As regards to the testing piece, I do appreciate what Chair Brumley said, and I know that's going to be a big discussion with the Social Work Board. I would just say the reason why it might hit BHAC is we have statutory language on our tests, and it does include the words fair and impartial. And the data that we got back from ASWB showed, for instance, for eventual test taking for the BSW, 84.8% of white applicants passed and 47.6% of Black applicants ultimately passed. That's almost half the rate. That's not fair and impartial. And I think that that is going to create some waves and will create a larger discussion. I would also just like to jump in. I so appreciate what Chair Blimowitz, said on creating guidance around relationships to discuss. I was concerned that this is done outside of rules and that there's no opportunity for public comment. And those who I saw in the discussion were largely non-professionals. I would just really hope that a professional from each board is part of any discussion there. I say that because the rules are a little bit different for each one, and the psychologist relationship with a client is not the same as the social work relationship with a client. And we want to make sure that if there is any guidance that comes out, it does take into account the various different rules changes. And if there is an opportunity to provide public comment, I think that would be absolutely fantastic. And again, appreciate just the opportunity to comment and the work you do.
Hey, Will.
Yes.
I don't mean to correct you, but the fee rule was published on August 4th or August 5th in the Texas Register.
Was wow, you know, that's called karma. Thank you. I will go back and check that again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Just for the public's edification, Will and I do like each other. It's okay that we rag on each other. Ms. Kimball, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
I do. You know, I'm glad I showed up because it seems like I'm one of the very few people that's actually on the battlefield. So I'm giving you a different perspective from, you know, being a corporate provider of mental health care, a hospital, a politician, because I'm hearing a whole lot of voices here, but not that of the clinical counselor that's actually working every single day trying to provide mental health care to people. So again, the CEUs, when I took my license, I did not surrender my rights as a professional, my own common sense and judgment as to what the scope of my practice should be. I also, again, if people aren't passing their tests, they need to study or go back to classes. Okay, because we all have the same playing field, really. It depends what we put into it. But you get 3 opportunities to pass the test, 3. And if you can't do it, maybe you shouldn't be seeing people. I don't know. I also want you to be aware of, as a Christian counselor, in a network called Focus on the Family, and we got warnings that we have people that are being planted into our practices to try to nail us on something. Oh, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're homophobic, you're this and that. No, I'm a born again Christian. I don't make a secret of it. So I don't counsel everyone. That is ethical, that is moral. That's my personal responsibility. So I have trouble with when we have these continuing educations and my only choice is to go to PESI, and the homosexual agenda is pushed there. This equity agenda is pushed there. I want to go and learn about modalities and interventions that address universal problems like depression, anxiety, you know, coming out of the pandemic. It doesn't have a color, but there is a problem. I provide a sliding scale so that people that can afford counseling can come to me. Okay, I'm not popular. My practice will never be as big as someone that is more inclusive. And that's okay because I do meet a certain need. But I don't want to have to go and sit in 24 hours of CEUs as someone pushing their agenda.
30 seconds.
I'm fed up with it. And again, that's my money that I'm spending. I just think it's so weird to hear a board tell me what I have to study. I'm also a Hispanic. And so, you know, to sit there and have somebody of a different culture to tell me how to address the Hispanic community is, you know, it's just overstepping. There, I spoke again. Oops. Prickly, right, John? Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no telephone callers, Madam Chair. That concludes public comment.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you who are tuning in with us today and interested in what's happening in behavioral health in the state of Texas. And thanks to all of you board members. I guess I'll see you in October. Please call me if anything comes up between now and then. Sure appreciate it. Bye, everybody. God bless.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.